Welcome aboard, everybody, for the next session of our Chumash class, in which we're taking a close look at the first pasuk, the first verse in the entire Torah. We're taking a look at first Rashi. Rashi is always the way we start. We start with the pasuk, start with the verse. That's the place to start. And then we take a look at Rashi and give Rashi a serious look. And then we take a look at the Ramban. That is our modus operandi in this particular class. The last several times actually, we studied the Rashi's first comment. Now, I said before, the place to always start, of course, is the first verse. And then think about the verse, think about the problems in the verse, and then take a look at what Rashi has to say. Interestingly enough, that doesn't work if you want to understand the first Rashi in the Torah. Why? Because the first Rashi in the Torah, if you remember, didn't say anything about the first verse in the Torah. The first Rashi in the Torah asked a very fundamental question, and that is, what do we need all this stuff for? Okay? And he answered it in the way he answered it, and we took a look at how the Ramban, Nachmanides, then tried to explain perhaps what that midrashic source that Rashi quotes meant. And we saw that he puts a spin on it, the Ramban puts a spin on that midrash, which is not the way the midrash is popularly understood. But I think after we had a little assist from Professor Freund over here, we did come up with a rather compelling spin on that midrash, and we're not going to repeat what that was right now. If you want to know what it was, you can take a look at the, you can ask Dr. Freund, or you can go on to the Rabbi Joel's F YouTube channel, and you can watch the class there. Okay. Now, today we're actually going to, believe it or not, start the verse. So let's dig right in. Bereishit, bara Elohim et hashamayim v'ha'aretz. The problem is you can't translate it. So I'm going to translate it the way it's normally translated. And that translation is going to ignore all the problems. So just bear in mind that you have to say something. So I'm going to translate it. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Fine. But that ignores a lot. So what's the first thing we're going to do is we're going to dig into Rashi. So if you take a look at your Chumash that has the Rashi, but the truth matters you don't need it, because for your learning convenience, I have prepared for you a source sheet here that has everything on it. So the Rashi is the next source in Lashon HaKodesh, in the Hebrew language. But for your learning convenience, if you'll turn to the penultimate page in this packet, so arduously prepared, to be off the streets, you will see a translation of the first Rashi in Chumash that deals with the verse itself. Okay, so you have the Hebrew on the first page, and you have the English translation of that on the second to the last page, the penultimate page. Fine. So let's dig right in. Rashi says the following: Ein hamikra hazeh omer ela darsheni. This verse is a very famous phrase. This verse says nothing other than explain me. So the image is quite nice. You can imagine the verse crying out, explain me. Now what Rashi means by that is that this verse eludes any straightforward explanation. So we're forced to engage in drasha, drush. Now drush is the same word, of course, as midrash. Midrash are the interpretations that are associated with the verses in the Torah that are found in the Talmud and in the midrashic anthologies that come from Talmudic time. I just want to discuss that word for one moment. Can anybody tell me what the word Daled Resh Shin really means? Demand. That's 100% right. And it could also mean to seek. So, and those are closely related meanings. So when Rashi says that this verse says nothing other than darsheni, this verse is demanding. That's what it means, doresh. A midrash is demanding of the verse, meaning we're holding the verse up to the wall by the collar, by the lapels, and saying, "Give me meaning, or else I won't let you down." Okay, so that's what Rashi means when this verse we have to demand of it meaning, because the plain meaning is extremely problematic. Now, Rashi here doesn't tell you why this verse is problematic. He will tell you in the next paragraph. But what I want to do is anticipate just a bit why the verse is problematic, so that we'll understand at least a little bit why Rashi is forced right off the bat to quote a midrash. I've been saying every week that 98.6% of Rashis are based upon midrashic material. You will believe me by the time we're done. And I hope even just from our limited sample here. Okay, I don't know about 98.6, but a big percentage. The problem, which is a very, very famous problem, is in the word Bereishit, the very first word of the Torah. The problem is the following, and Dr. Friend, would you please tell us what the problem with that word is?
I think it's in mismach.
Good. So that word, Bereishit, means the following. So the be is a prefix. It's a preposition. It means in. Reshit is the next word that has that in stuck to it. Reshit is in, as we just heard from Dwight, the construct case, or in Hebrew, call that smichut. Now, the construct means the following. Of. Something of. That's what construct case does. I'll give you an example. How do you say sons in Hebrew?
Banim.
Banim. Thank you very much. That was close. That was close. That's daughters. That's okay. You're a feminist. It's okay. Yeah, it's okay. You know those feminists. Okay. So banim. Now, let's say we wanted to say the sons of Jacob. B'nai Yaakov. So that word b'nai is in the construct case, and that construct case is indicated by a certain morphology, by a certain grammatical form. And that form is, in the case of the masculine plural, right? So you're saying banim, you say b'nai. Okay, so sons of. Now, what must always follow a noun in the construct case? Sons of another noun. There's no other option when you say a noun of. Sons of. Or how about, I'll think of an arbitrary example. The beginning of. I just made that up arbitrarily. What must follow the phrase beginning of? A noun. Like you could say the beginning of time. You could say the beginning of the world. You could say whatever. You need a noun. So the construct case must always be followed by a noun. So, Rabotai ugvirotai, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, the very next word in the verse, we only started with the first word. We're not going very far. We're stuck on the very first word in the Torah, is bara. Now, we're going to have to discuss a little bit of Hebrew grammar here. You'll forgive me. Bara is what part of speech?
Verb.
It's a verb. It's a verb which is in what tense? Past tense. Is it singular or plural? Singular. Okay. Masculine or feminine?
Feminine.
Oh, come on. You did so good there. You're just trying to stay humble. It's masculine. Okay. So bara means he created. So I'm going to translate the first two words in Hebrew scripture. In the beginning of, he created. Well, I am about to have a severe crisis. In the beginning of, he created. What is demanding explanation? In the beginning of what? It's not there. Maybe it got erased by accident. That's not right. I just keep keeping you awake. Okay, so we have a very severe crisis. Everybody following this so far? I didn't promise you a rose garden here. I told you we're learning text now. This is like, I'm not entertaining anymore. This is the real thing.
That's fine. Go ahead.
Okay, l'chaim. I'm apologizing, Moshe.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. So that's why Rashi starts up by saying, we're going to have to resort to a midrash. We have to resort to a midrash. So, would you like to see the midrash? I'm so glad you asked. Kemoshe darshuhu rabotenu, as our rabbis darshaned it. Now, I'm using a word that doesn't exist in the normative English language, but I wanted you to appreciate the idea. So we learned the word drash, which means to interpret, to demand meaning. So as our rabbis darshaned it, by the way, people really do speak that way. In English, or yeshivish, so there's such a word. The rabbis darshan the pasuk, okay, to darshan. They demand meaning from it, quoting a midrash. Whenever you find this expression, it doesn't mean our rabbis darshan. It doesn't mean the rabbi down the street, as dignified as he may be. What rabbis are we talking about when you see that expression? Our rabbis darshaned it. The rabbis gave a midrash on this. It means which rabbis? The ones in the Talmud. It's not your local rabbi. Okay, it's the ones in the Talmud who lived anywhere from 30 BCE, before the Common Era. It's hard to know exactly up to what point. The Talmud wasn't really created by any person, so it kind of fades out. But something like the 5th century, okay, maybe even later. And let's read the midrash. Kamosha darshu rabotenu. Now, you should know that when Rashi quotes a midrash, he sometimes tells you where he got it from. But in case he doesn't tell you, a lot of other rabbis who lived since Rashi tell you. And there's footnotes in printed editions, and it's not a problem to figure out where Rashi gets, usually it's not a problem where Rashi gets these midrashim from. But let's read the midrash. Bishvil HaTorah, for the Torah. I'm just translating the words right now. Shenikret Bereishit Darko, which is called the first of his path, or the beginning of his path. Ubishvil Yisrael, and for Israel, Shenikru, who are called Bereishit Tvuato, the first of his. Anybody know what Tvua means?
Produce.
His produce. Very good. His produce. Okay. Now, let's back up. You know that little word "b" in Bereishit? We translated it as "in." The problem is that these prepositions don't necessarily mean what they tell you in modern Hebrew course. Bit can mean, and most prepositions, a li, bit, mit, all these words can mean an incredible range of meanings. The word bit, it doesn't necessarily mean in the beginning of. It can mean with, it can mean for, all kinds of English prepositions. So let's now go back into this midrash and try to understand what the midrash is doing. This is all technology right now. Just understand just the technology of this midrash. So the midrash said, Bishvil HaTorah. Bereishit means Bishvil HaTorah. What's Bishvil in Hebrew mean? For the sake of. For the sake of. So bit is being understood as for the sake of. And now, what are we left with? We've taken care of the bit in the Bereishit. It means for the sake of. Now, what other word do we have to interpret? The word Bereishit, which we know problematically means beginning of. But we're going to ignore that. And we're going to say that the word Bereishit is a code word. It's a code word. Well, a code word for what? Bishvil HaTorah, for the Torah. Now, why would the word Bereishit be a code word for the Torah? Because it says in Proverbs, Bereishit Darko. The Torah is the beginning of his way. So that's a reference to Torah for divine wisdom. It's Bereishit Darko, the beginning of his way. So the word Bereishit is sort of perhaps poetically evoking the Torah, because the Torah is Bereishit Darko. So Bishvil means, if we're now going to translate this verse midrashically, Bereishit means Bishvil HaTorah. For the Torah, he created the heaven and the earth. That's what that verse would mean according to this midrash. For the Torah, Bereishit. For the sake of, as my dad explained, for the sake of the Torah, he created heaven and earth. Now the midrash goes on. And Bishvil Yisrael. Or for the sake of Israel. Now, how does the word Bereishit poetically evoke Israel? By the way, it doesn't mean the country Israel. It means the people of Israel. Shanikra'u Bereishit Tuato, because if you look at Jeremiah, the prophet Jeremiah is referring to Jewish people and says that the Jewish people are the beginning of his produce, like Israelis. Okay, they're the beginning of God's. It's sort of like a less perhaps a poetic term. What's a less poetic term? The first of his produce we might call what other Hebrew word or English word? It doesn't really matter. In English,
Chosen people.
Okay, no, but using that image of the produce, because produce sounds funny. It sounds like you're Israelis, right? In fact, it would be bikurim, the first fruits. So that's really the idea, that the first fruits of God are Israel. Okay, that's the verse. So the Israel is referred to as with the idea of Bereishit. Bereishit. So now we're going to translate the verse again. So now the verse means, according to the continuation, the midrash, Bereishit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz, that for the sake of Israel, God created the heaven and the earth. Okay, now I know this is being broadcast to the whole cosmos, and I can imagine if someone was hearing this, they would say, there they go again, the master race theorists. God created the heaven and the earth for Mark's lot below. I mean, come on, right? Now, I don't want to deal with that philosophical problem right now. I could, but I'm not going to. Okay? Okay. That's the midrash.
Thank you, because I can't deal with the whole world.
Okay. Okay.
You have absolved him of any guilt.
So that's it. That's the midrash. That's the midrash. Okay. We've solved the problem. Sort of. Okay. Now, the Ramban doesn't like this, as you're about to see. Now, let me just tell you what we're going to do. I want to take a look at the Ramban's critique of this Rashi. Now, remember, is this really Rashi? This is the second time we've seen this. Is this really Rashi? It's a midrash. It's coming right out of the material from the Talmudic sages. Now, in traditional Judaism, we don't look at that as simply some other opinion, right? The Talmudic sages are viewed with great awe and authority, invested with great authority. So the Ramban, we'd be pretty surprised if we said, this is absurd, and I can't understand why Rashi would quote such an absurd opinion. Let's take a look at how the Ramban deals with this. So if you'll take a look at the bottom of the page on the first sheet here, so that's the Hebrew of the Ramban, and well, look at how nice I am. If you take a look at the very last page, I have the entire Ramban in English. Now, how's that? Okay, how cool is that?
Very cool.
That is very cool. Now, let me just, oh, yeah, it's also getting cool in here. I'm enjoying it. Of course, I'm drinking coffee and talking a lot, so I'm warming up. Now, I just want to tell you what we're going to do after seeing the Ramban's critique and then the Ramban's comment where he reinterprets things. where they're going to return to Rashi and try to understand Rashi on a deeper level, a more philosophical level. Those who've been learning with me for a while, I have a certain way of operating. I take Midrashim very seriously. Okay? Not necessarily literally. I take them very seriously. Okay? And we're going to do that through the eyes of the Maharal of Prague, without the help of his goals. Okay? So let's take a look at the Ramban. The Ramban says the following. Katav Rashi. Rashi wrote the following. Ein hamikra hazeh omer ela darsheni. This verse says nothing other than demand of me, meaning darshan me. Okay? Kamosha darshuhu rabotenu bishul Torah shenikret Bereishit shneimar Hashem kanani Bereishit darko bishul Yisrael shenikret Bereishit shneimar Kodesh Yisrael Hashem Bereishit vuato. So he simply quotes Rashi, but it is interesting to note, by the way, it's a more complete version of the Midrash. Rashi has a little bit of our at least version of Rashi is a little bit of a streamlined version, but there's
or a more complete citation from
the verses.
Tanakh.
Yeah, the verses are more complete, and for our purposes, it's not significant right now. Fine. Now listen to what the Ramban now says. V'hamidrash hazeh l'rabotenu satum v'chatum ma'od. This midrash of our sages is satum v'chatum ma'od. I need some help from the Hebrew scholars here. How about satum? Filled up, sealed off. It is sealed off. And chatum, what's a chatima?
Seal.
It's also a seal. And what is it? It's those two things. Ma'od. What's ma'od mean? A heck of a lot. What does he mean by this midrash is extraordinarily sealed off? Sealed off from what?
From us knowing what it really means.
Right. That this, what we might say in English, we might say this midrash is extraordinarily obscure. Obscure. When someone is an obscurantist, what do? They hide meaning.
Not just hidden, but they do it really.
Yeah, on purpose, maliciously. Okay.
No, not malicious.
Now look what he says here. Ki dvarim rabim matzu shenikru Bereishit. There are a heck of a lot of things in Hebrew scripture which are called Bereishit, the first of. You see, look at first glance, what's the midrashic technology here? It says, for the sake of Bereishit, God created the heaven and the earth. Okay, ostensibly, let's see what the word Bereishit poetically evokes. Oh, well, I'll be a monkey's uncle. It's used in reference to Israel, and it's used in reference to the Torah. So now I've decoded the first verse, at least midrashically. Ramban says, not so fast, Kowalski. If you go through all of Tanakh, and you find every place the word Bereishit appears, and it is not a rare word, you will find all kinds of things. Ubekulam lehem midrashim. And you will find, in fact, that there are alternative midrashim which will even evoke and interpret the appearance of that word Bereishit, beginning of, and apply it to even our verse and come up with very strange meanings. And people of little faith will, in fact, relate to them in their multiplicity. What he means by this, I believe, is that people will, as we'll say explicitly in a moment, people will mock this midrash. As you'll see, he's going to actually engage in a little bit of mocking. He doesn't really mean it, but he's just showing you what absurd lengths you could go to if you understand this midrash in the way it seems to mean.
Just give you a little faith.
Yeah. Okay. Amru, for instance, he's going to quote a midrash here. Bizchut shlosha davarim nivra olam. In the merit of three things, for the sake of three things, God created the world. Now, we just read a midrash that said God created the world for the sake of two things. What are those two things? Torah and Israel. Now, those are actually very impressive things, Torah and Israel. But let's take a look at other midrash. Bizchut chala, bizchut masrot, ubizchut bikurim. For the sake of chala. Now, challah here doesn't mean what you eat after making kiddush on Friday night.
don't eat challah.
right, unless you're a Kohen. So this is a technical reference to the word challah, that according to the Torah, we have to take certain tithes, and we make bread, we remove a certain tithe from the dough. That's called challah. It happens to be that for reasons that a linguist can explore, we start to call the bread the challah, but it's a tremendous misnomer. The part that's removed from the bread is the challah, and the bread itself is the thing that is now kosher to eat because it's had the challah removed. So nowadays we burn the challah.
Yes.
You don't eat it. Okay? Now, for the sake of that piece of dough, you know why God created the world? For dough. Now, if you heard that sentence out of context, you would. That's the second point that the listeners would say.
You know, it came from
Look
Wall
at
Street.
those Jews. For the sake of dough, God created the world. Yeah, money, money, money. Right? Yeah. So this sounds a little weird. So, but if you're a little skeptical, Bishut Masrot, for the sake of tithes. So tithes are referring to a farmer. He has to give a certain percentage to, depending upon the year, to the poor, to the priests, to the Levites, etc. Ubishut Bikurim, or for the sake of first fruits, the first fruit offerings. So you know why God created the world? For tithes. You know why God created the world? For the sake of first fruits. Let's read on. Bereishit bara Elohim. In the beginning, God created the world. Ein Rishit ela challah, and Reshit is definitely referring to challah for the sake of challah. God created the world. Shneimar, as it says in Bamidbar, Reshit arisotechem, the beginning of your kneading trough. So what's the dough? Is called what? Reshit. So when it says Bereshit, for the sake of Reshit, God created the world. For the sake of dough, that's why God created the world. Vein Reshit ela masrot shneimar Reshit deganecha. It says in the book of Deuteronomy, Reshit deganecha, the first of your grain. So when it says Bereishit bara Elohim, for the sake of Reshit, God created the world. For the sake of the grain, that's why. Vein Reshit ela bikurim. And Reshit is also the first fruits. Shneimar Reshit bikurei admatecha, in the beginning of the first fruits of your soil, of your land. So what do you see here? God created the world for the first fruit offerings. Now, in case you haven't had enough, the Od Amru, he quotes from Midrash Rabbah again, Bishut Moshe. You know why God created the world? For the sake of Moses. Shneimar, because it says Vayar Reshit Lo. He saw the beginning of him, the beginning to him. That's a reference to Moshe. Doesn't matter right now the exact context, but so now we translate the Torah. Bereishit bara Elokim Shemaim v'aretz. For the sake of Reshit, and what's Reshit? It's a poetic reference to Moshe. For the sake of Moses, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, what's the Ramban's point? That if you take Rashi at face value, who's just quoting the Midrash without comment, what is the more skeptical, perhaps even cynical reader going to say? This is absurd. God created the whole cosmos for the sake of Israel, okay, Torah, okay, Moses, challah, tithes, first fruits. There's no end. Ein l'davar sof, as they say. There's no end to this. Okay. So the Ramban now says that this is a very similar methodology, by the way, to the last time we saw the Ramban. What did the Ramban do? Rashi quoted a Midrash, and the Ramban said, just quoting a Midrash and leaving it as is, which Rashi does. One of the reasons Rashi became so famous is because he's actually very terse. He's very, very terse. So he quoted the Midrash without comment. He usually does that. Or quote a rabbinic source without comment. The Ramban comments. It's a lot longer, right? Just to give you an example, this is the Ramban on the book of Genesis. So, and this is without the Torah in it. It's just the Ramban. So, you could have all of Rashi on the entire Chumash easily in the volume this size. Okay? So the Ramban now is going to say, look, Rashi, it wasn't, just to quote it like that, it can lead people who are a little cynical to not have proper reverence. So the Ramban's could say, so I'm going to tell you what that midrash means. And I think the Ramban probably would not have started his commentary on the Torah by quoting that particular midrash. The Kavanat Tamzo. What did our sages mean with this midrash? Shemilat Bereishit Tirmos. That the word Reshit, it alludes that the world was created through the 10 emanations. Now, right away, we are meeting somebody we haven't met yet. And that's Ramban qua Kabbalist. The Ramban as a Kabbalist. When the Ramban told us that the entire book of Genesis and half the book of Exodus cannot be understood, he didn't mean you can't translate it. What he meant was that you cannot really understand it without mysticism. And so too here, he says that this verse, Bereishit bara Elokim, in the beginning God created the heavens and earth, is an allusion to the fact that the world was created through the 10 emanations. Now let me just briefly explain what the 10 emanations are. Now, we can't possibly do this justice. At least I can't.
Standing on one foot.
I'm not even sure if I was on 2 feet and had a lot of time, I would do it justice. But very briefly, God, in his essence, is unknowable. Ein Sof. Ein Sof. Kabbalah is very concerned with what is the relationship between God and creation. Because we have a very severe philosophical problem, Jews. What's the problem? Our problem is that we don't believe God, in essence, has any connection with this world. He can't. Because God is utterly transcendent. Utterly transcendent, utterly beyond. The famous Maimonidean theory of negative attributes, where Maimonides, in discussing this principle, says the only thing you can tell about God is what he isn't. Because once you say anything, you can't even say God is wise. Because that is attributing to God an attribute, which is a human attribute. What does wise mean? It's wisdom. Wisdom is a word that means something to us. So Maimonides says, if you really want to talk about God, you can only say things he's not. I'll tell you one thing about God, he ain't stupid. Well, that's a true statement. But don't say he's wise. Okay, you get the idea. So, and everybody agrees to this, even though the Rambam says this, even the Kabbalists agree to that. The only problem is that somehow out of that infinite transcendence in which nothing positive can be said, there has to evolve a created world. Flesh and blood, dimensionality, finitude. How do you bridge that gap? The Sfirot. The Sfirot describe a kind of flowing out from some kind of utterly transcendent essence of God, and then a kind of outward expression, which is not the same thing as God's essence, but has some relationship to the essence in a way which then results in creation. So let me give you an analogy for this idea. Let's say that I'm an actor. Let's say I'm an actor. Matter of fact, the next rabbi is an actor. I don't mean that in a negative sense. He actually was a trained actor. That was his first career. So he's on stage and he's playing whatever. Shylock. Now there's a human being up there. Is he Shylock? No. But he is outwardly expressing himself in a certain way, which is very dramatic and impacting on the audience. But in the actor's essence, he's not Shylock. You assume he's not Shylock, right? He's Rabbi Zilberstein. Okay. So it's the same thing with God. God in his essence, it's a mystery. But God becomes sort of an actor. And he's projecting himself outward, like an actor is projecting himself outward towards the stage, towards the audience. And the different modalities in the way that God expresses himself, which results in creation, those are called the emanations, the sfirot in Hebrew. And there are 10 of them. And creation can be understood almost formulaically, almost as if it was physics, by understanding different aspects of creation as being different permutations of the sfirot, of these different creative forces emanating out from God. Okay, let's go back into the language of the Ramban. V'ramaz l'sfira hanikret chokhmah sheba yesod hakol. That the Torah is alluding to one of the 10 sfirot, one of the 10 emanations, which is the root of everything. Which of the 10 emanations is that? Chokhmah. Chokhmah. Okay, chokhmah can be translated as wisdom, but it doesn't mean wisdom in the normal sense that we would say that. It's called wisdom, whatever it is. That's its name. And that chokhmah is yesod kol. What's yesod mean? Foundation of everything. Ki'inyan shene'amar, and we see this Kabbalistic idea alluded to in the book of Proverbs. We read Proverbs a lot today, where it says Hashem b'chokhmah yasad arts. That Hashem through chokhmah founded the earth. So the emanation of chokhmah is the foundational emanation that created everything else. So if the word Bereishit is an allusion to that, then it makes a lot of sense if you're Kabbalist. Now, I can give you an example of how the word Bereishit could be an allusion to the sphera of Chokhmah. Bereishit Chokhmah Yirat Hashem. Very famous verse. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. Bereishit Chokhmah. So this is actually very evocative of our Midrash. Bereishit means through Bereishit, which is a word which expresses the emanation of Chokhmah. God created the heavens and the earth. So now, the Ramban says, the Efshar laharich, but I see the ellipsis there, there's 3 dots. I took out a whole bunch of stuff because I just wanted to give you a taste. We're not going to study Kabbalah here. I just wanted to give you a taste. V'efshar laharich b'feiruseha inyan b'michtav. He says, you know what? I can't explain this at length in writing. B'harem is rav hanezik. It can cause a lot of damage. Ki yispru bo svarot ein bahem emet. If I write this down in some way that kind of alludes to these deep Kabbalistic ideas, people will understand it in ways which are not true. Aval hizkarti says, so why did he say anything? Why did he, if he can't explain it? He says he can't explain it because it's too hard to explain and people will misunderstand it. So why did he say anything? So he has to apologize. Aval hizkarti ze livlom pi kitnei amuna mu'utei chokhmah. I said this in order to leave loam. Anybody know what leave loam means? To put a break. In modern Hebrew, blamim are breaks. To put a break on the mouth of those who have little faith and who have little wisdom. Hamaligim al divrei rabotenu, who scoff at the words of our sages. So what he wanted to do here is to say, look, that midrash, which says the word Bereishit is symbolic of something, if you just take it at face value, it looks absurd. It's actually alluding to a very deep Kabbalistic idea. The Rambam says, I can't explain it to you, though. It's too dangerous. But trust me, he says, it's alluding to something very deep. I just wanted to give you a little taste, so at least you won't laugh at it. You won't scoff at it. You'll know that this midrash is trying to say something very, very significant.
Was Zohar written after Ramban or
Before the Ramban. Before the Ramban. He knows about the Ramban. He knows about the Zohar.
This is Sefer Yetzirah.
Yeah. So the publisher says Ayin Sefer Yetzirah. He says compare this idea to Sefer Yetzirah, chapter 1, section 14. So this is not a quote. It's that this idea is more fully developed in Sefer Yetzirah. When Sefer Yetzirah is indeed a very ancient book of Kabbalah. Okay, so far so good. Now, what I'd like to do in the remaining a few moments is to return to that midrash, which Rashi quoted, but without comment, and to try to take it seriously, but not like the Ramban did. Now, the Ramban took it very seriously, and he says it's actually alluding to Kabbalah, and it's alluding to this idea of the first emanation, through which the old was created, which is called Chokhmah, etc. That's beyond my league. It's beyond my pay grade. Okay? So what I'd like to do is take a look at a more conventional, perhaps, approach. And we're going to be exposed to a couple different things here. There are many, many, many commentaries on Rashi's commentary. We call these super commentaries. Okay? And there are commentaries on the super commentaries. This is what keeps us employed. Okay? One of the most famous of the super commentaries on Rashi was written by none other than the Maharal of Prague, the great, wonderful thinker who died in 1609. Prague. Okay. He wrote a commentary on Rashi. He calls his commentary Gur Aryeh, a lion cub. You know why he calls his commentary Gur Aryeh? Because what was his name, the Maharal? Dad, what was his real name?
Yehuda.
Yeah.
Yehuda Leib.
Yeah, but it's not Leib, it's like Leib
Oh.
in German, Yiddish, which means a lion, right?
L-O-E-D.
Yeah,
Or L-O-E.
with an umlaut.
W. Yeah.
Right.
It's a lion.
Yeah, so he's a Gur, he's a lion cub. Okay, let's read what we have to say. Now this is the page I said I might do, depending upon how things go. It's only in Hebrew. I don't have this in English. If you want to follow the Hebrew, so it's here. Okay.
And merge it later.
Okay. Let's read what he has to say here. It says the following. Bishvila Torah. Bishvila Yisrael Torah. Right? The Midrash says that God created the world for Israel and the Torah. You know what the Maharal does? He takes this at face value. God really did create the world for the Torah and for Israel. Because what does that mean? He says the following. The first thing he tells you, Bereishit Rabbah. The super commentaries always start by telling you what's Rashi's source. They didn't have the printed editions that we have now that tell you Rashi's source. He says it's in Bereishit Rabbah, this midrash, and it's in the first chapter, Bereishit Rabbah, the fourth section. He says, this midrash quoted by Rashi says there are two things that the world is created for, the sake of Israel, the sake of Torah. Why those two things? We can understand it based upon a very important verse in Proverbs again, Mishlei. All that God has affected, all the acts of God, creation, that's how he's understanding this, Lamane, are for God's sake. You know why God created the world? For his sake. For his sake. Rotzelomar. What does this mean? Everything that the world was created is for God's sake, for his glory. And he quotes from Yeshayahu, the prophet Isaiah. Everything I created for my glory, God says. That's why the world exists. Okay. Now, what aspect of creation glorifies God? Well, let's read on. There's no glorification of God from things that are created unless they carry out his commandments and serve him. Like, right? Something, a person who's a criminal, that's not a praise of God. The true praise of God is when we live in this world, which is detached from God, right? We talked about a little bit the Kabbalistic idea, right? God is hidden. If you don't think he's hidden, then we need to talk, okay? God is hidden, okay? But in that state of hiddenness, one commits oneself to acting in a way which is harmonious with the divine will. That is the glory of God. So then he goes on. Vein zerak b'uma Yisraelit. That's why Jews were created. Jews were created in order to glorify God by living a life individually and collectively, which is in harmony with the divine will. Va'aleim ne'amar, that's why it says in the prophet Isaiah again, Zu yatzarti li tilati saperu. I formed this nation for me. They shall relate my praise. Shelakach yatzarti otam. That's why I fashioned them. They sapru tilati, so they should give my praise. But now, how does that work? What is it? Does one just go around saying, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts"? Or does one meditate in a cave? Is that how one proclaims the greatness of God?
Some people think so.
Some people think so. He says no. It's when we use the resources which God has given us, the capacity to think, to speak, to act, and to use those capacities to mirror God's image, to reflect God's image, to carry out his will, to live in harmony with God's will. What's another way of saying that? To carry out his mitzvot. Torah. That's what the Torah is. That's what the Midrash means. That the world was created for two things, for Torah and for Israel. These are not arbitrary two things that happen to use Bereishit. It's an important philosophical statement that the whole cosmos exists so that God can be praised and known even in a world with which he is normally hidden, through living harmoniously with his will, which is revealed through the Torah, and that is our national agenda. That's our constitution. It's supposed to be. I'll skip that line. Then he responds to the Ramban obliquely. He says, you know what? It's true. You can find many places in the Torah in which it uses the word Bereishit and other midrashim that talk about for the sake of that. Why did Rashi choose these two in this particular midrash? Because this is foundational. This notion that the world was created in order that that God's name should become known in this world, and that happens through one nation that takes upon itself this particular great and profound task. And that is the deeper and serious meaning of this midrash, and that's why Rashi begins by quoting that particular midrash. But the excuse, of course, is the grammatical point that it says Bereishit, the beginning of, and then there's no noun after that. And then that opens up the possibility of a midrash, which is conveying a very, like I said, foundational point. Okay, we'll pause here. And I just want to make a scheduling notice. So next week I will be out of town, and the following week we'll meet again. Okay, so next week I will be in the holy city of Seattle. Finish Moab. And then we'll meet again the week after that.
I thought you were trying to get a
Excuse me?